3 years have passed since a virus appeared on Earth that destroys all types of plants. This can very quickly lead to a catastrophic drop in oxygen levels in the atmosphere and the death of all living things. But humanity can still be saved if it implements the project of Dr. Stephen Ross. The idea is based on discoveries made several years ago. Then archaeologists found 2 mysterious artifacts created by an unknown civilization more than 4 billion years ago. People managed to copy the engine for jumping in hyperspace. They flew hundreds of light years and found a planet called Tess. It is perfect for life. The second artifact is a mysterious sphere that produces living matter and with certain settings allows to recreate the Earth's ecosystem. Scientists have deciphered dozens of commands, each with its own pattern. Stephen shows the master code that the sphere began executing about 4 billion years ago. The Doctor then introduces the team, which will head to the new planet. They must deliver the sphere there, which will immediately begin creating conditions suitable for humanity. Stephen thinks about the woman he loves. At this time, she rushes to the cosmodrome to say goodbye to him, but does not make it before the ship departs. During the flight, scientists continue their research, trying to understand where those who created these artifacts are now. The moment comes to make a hyperjump. Captain Ryan gives the standby order. Peter enters the coordinates and the ship pierces space. But suddenly, something happens that causes the crew to lose consciousness. After some time, people come to their senses and try to understand where they are. This is clearly not the planet Tess, because the star maps do not match. Steven thinks Peter got the coordinates wrong. He removes him from further piloting and sends him to his cabin. Stephen remembers how he typed some command on the sphere in a cave, and then saw a glowing silhouette in front of him. The man asks to restore the trajectory of the jump, but they still cannot figure out where the ship went. At this moment, a message comes about the opening of the gateway, and the next minute, people see Peter's frozen body in the porthole. David suggests that the scientist committed suicide, but Leona does not believe in this possibility. Now they no longer have an engine specialist. Steven suddenly realizes what kind of planet is in front of them. He analyzes the probe data and understands that the characteristics of the planet are even better than Tess and orders the ship to land. Despite Ryan's objections, the space module heads towards the planet, but the weather conditions are unfavorable and the ship is shaking violently. At this moment, Steven remembers how shortly before the flight he gave Amy a bracelet made from a small chip of an ancient sphere. Richard runs diagnostics on the module and learns that they are almost out of fuel. It will be difficult to return to the main ship, but Steven demands the mission to be completed. They were carried away from the calculated point, but there is a cave nearby where they can leave the sphere. People begin to work and do not notice the substance that remains after the sphere. After some time, the team reaches the cave and places the artifact there. Steven is happy with the conditions on this planet. Meanwhile, the mechanic inspects the airlock where Peter died. He finds traces of an unknown substance and the scientist's video camera. Steven activates the sphere, after which the team returns to the module. Richard shows footage from Peter's camera. People see that he was killed and thrown into space by some creature. The team assumes that the monster came out of the sphere. The creature is given the name Trojan. At this time, the first data comes from the cave, but it is not at all what it should be. Steve suggests returning to the cave, but the captain removes him from command and declares martial law. Most likely, it is the sphere that gives birth to these monsters. The Doctor remembers David telling him of his intention to fly with them. Steve was against his flight, believing that the man needed to recover after the death of his daughter. But David was determined to participate in changing the future, so Steve goes to ask for his help. The man must go into the cave and change the sphere settings against Ryan's orders in order to save the Earth. In the cave, they see the sphere creating a new life form. It's obvious that someone reconfigured it. Suddenly, David sees on the tablet that the Trojan is approaching. But Steven cannot leave without completing the mission. David prepares to use his weapon, but it is too late. The monster is almost nearby, but for some reason does not touch David. The men run to the exit and barely have time to jump into the module. The captain comes out to meet the scientists. An argument begins between them, which escalates into a fight. A danger signal sounds due to a broken module seal. The Trojan got inside. Strange sounds wake up Leon. She goes out into the hallway and runs into Frank. The couple rushes to the laboratory. Inside, people understand that the Trojan is already here. The man pushes Leon out and dies. The woman runs to the bridge, where the survivors are trying to understand how Trojan got into the module. Apparently, this creature has intelligence if it managed to find the hole. A backup generator needs to be turned on to run lighting and communications. Steve decides to go through with it because he feels guilty. Together with the captain, they go out into the corridor. They manage to connect the generator and escape from the monster. Now they need to kick Trojan out of the ship. Steven suggests luring the monster into a trap. Then they need to turn on the engine and burn the monster with the remaining fuel. The team agrees on a plan and disperses to positions. Almost everything works out, but when Trojan is already jumping out, the engines fail. The monster manages to run away from the ship, and Leona finds herself under the airlocks, which finally work. Steven manages to jump into the airlock, but Trojan injures David. At the next moment, the door cuts off the monster's tentacles. Then people seal the hole. Trojan will not get inside, but the sphere remains under his control. Steve remembers how the virus appeared in Amy's home garden and how she asked him to stay home because they were having a baby. She found a way to develop a vaccine and they can do it. But Steven was thinking about the whole planet. Now in the laboratory, he is studying a piece of Trojan to find out how to cure David. He understands that these are the same materials from which the sphere is made. They repeated the material, not understanding who they were reviving. It turns out that David's blood contains a bacterium that serves as a vaccine against the virus that is destroying the Earth. Steve cuts the tentacles, and suddenly the light begins to flicker, and a ghostly figure appears in front of Steve again. It turns out that this is a biorobot that needs to be destroyed, and they also need to return the sphere's settings. But Ryan is against returning to the cave. The man locks the laboratory because Steven doesn't care about people. The main thing for him is his ambitions. David supports the commander and accuses Steve of wanting to win even at the cost of the crew's lives. Steven remembers how he said goodbye to Amy, but the woman did not want to talk to him and threw away the bracelet he gave her. And suddenly he realizes that Trojan's piece is an exact copy of the piece from which he made the bracelet. Steven asks Richard to simulate what this segment of space will look like 4 billion years from now. The shocked people understand that they moved in time, and in front of them is the Earth even before the origin of life on it. It turns out that this is the same fragment of the sphere, but at different times. This means that some intelligence sent the sphere to Earth, but something went wrong, and the sphere began to generate conditions that were unsuitable for the owners, but very favorable for people. Steve must tell Amy about bacteria that can defeat the virus. To do this, he writes a message on the bracelet. She must find and read the message, otherwise humanity will not appear. This is exactly what happens. Amy comes to the cave and remembers Steven. Ryan prepares a bomb to blow up the cave and the sphere along with it. Richard remotely opens the lab's airlock and Steven follows the captain. He tries to explain to Ryan what they just found out about the planet. But the captain is sure that the only way to destroy the Trojan is to blow up the cave. Steven tries to come up with another plan. David reborns under the influence of bacteria and kills Ryan. David finally understood everything. People should not exist, they are just a mistake. A shootout ensues as David intends to set things right. Steven manages to wound David and he hides in the corridor. The doctor activates the bomb and then fires a flare. He returns to the module to wait for the monster to arrive. Steve lures him inside and closes the doors, but then David appears again. The doctor is forced to shoot back at his former friend. The Trojan gets inside and attacks Steve, but the man shoots back and manages to jump into the hatch. He runs towards the company cabins where the bomb is activated. The monster chases him across the upper deck. When Steve runs into the room, David disarms him. But as soon as David wants to shoot, Trojan kills him. Steven manages to jump out of the module, after which the bomb explodes. Richard from the main ship tries to call survivors, but only Steve answers him. He will go to the cave and contact Amy. The scientist gets to the cave and places the broken piece on the sphere and then dials the required code. The sphere begins to work. At this time, it begins to rain on the Earth. Amy sees her bracelet, on which letters appear under the influence of water. She runs into the cave and dials this code. Suddenly, the walls seem to melt and they see each other. Steve explains what needs to be done to defeat the virus and then apologizes. He will not be able to return. The image becomes distorted and disappears. Amy finds herself alone in her time while Steve remains in the cave. Time passes, Amy's garden is healed and the baby is crying nearby.